Okay, it's 12:01. We see that people are still logging on, but that's okay. We're going to get started. And just want to begin by thanking all of you for joining us today for this community-wide briefing. We're trying to do these on a more regular basis because there's so much happening, not just in our community, but nationally and globally when it comes to the fight against anti-Semitism. And we want to do everything we can to keep you updated about what we're doing and also what you can do to make a meaningful difference. We just want to start by encouraging people to connect with us, not just through these webinars, but you may have seen that we sent an email out the other day introducing a new way of communicating with you. We have launched alerts via WhatsApp. So for those of you who use WhatsApp, and many people in the community, use it for neighborhood groups or just to keep informed about what's happening, please sign up for UJ WhatsApp alerts. My colleagues are going to put the information on screen for you to be able to add your name to our WhatsApp list. It is a closed list, meaning that if you add your name, no one else can see it. It's not a channel where there's a lot of dialogue that's going to be happening. It's really a way for us to broadcast messages out to the community through WhatsApp, especially when it pertains to urgent security issues or significant opportunities to make a difference in the cause of fighting anti-Semitism, whether it's calls to action or emails to elected officials. There are moments when we're calling on the entire community to add their name and to speak out. And so we're really going to reserve this WhatsApp channel for kind of those big moments and for those big updates. So again, if you take a look on screen, you'll see different ways to connect with us, whether it's our regular newsletters that you're not signed up for and you want to get signed up for those, please go online and sign up, but also please sign up for WhatsApp if you use the app. The other thing I want to encourage you to do, if you've not done so, is to sign up for our activist updates. We send these out a few times a week, and these are more in-depth calls to action where we'll provide either message points or interesting articles to share, social media posts to share and amplify, as well as updates about what's happening across the board on the issue of fighting anti-Semitism and building support for Israelis. And so please, if you're interested in more detailed updates in kind of the latest information about what's happening, sign up for activist updates because that's a great way to stay informed. With that, I'm going to kick off the conversation. For those who've been on the call before, you'll know that my name is Steve McDonald. I'm the Vice President of Communications and Marketing here at UJA. I'm joined by my colleague Noah Shack, who's UJA's Vice President of Countering Anti-Semitism and Hate. And what we're going to do is, as we have in previous sessions, is we're going to share a few important updates, and then we're going to open it up to a conversation through the chat Q&A. So if you do have questions, you don't have to wait for the Q&A session. You can go ahead and drop them into the chat function. We do receive a lot of questions in these sessions, so we're going to get right into it shortly. But I'm going to start with a quick update on the walk with Israel because people have been asking about the walk this year. Before I turn it over to Noah for an update on a few issues that are taking place in the community. Many people on the call, I'm sure, find that the walk is a highlight every year. We've been doing it as a community for over 50 years now. It's a really important milestone moment, not just for our Toronto Jewish community, but frankly, it's an important statement in the Jewish world about who we are as a community. Some of you will be aware that if you look across the entire diaspora, our Walk with Israel in Toronto is the world's largest Israel Solidarity Walk. There are other programs that take place in other communities, but ours is the largest, which is a communal walk to show our support for the people of Israel. And we really feel that powerful statement is needed, especially this year. And so we are inviting the entire community, and not only our community, but our allies, our friends, our neighbors, to join us this year on June 9th for the Walk with Israel. We're going to be sending out details to the community very shortly related to how you can sign up, register to get your walk kit, and also register to become a fundraiser because all of the dollars raised through the Walk with Israel go toward programs and services on the ground in Israel that are dedicated to helping Israelis to recover, rebuild, and emerge stronger from the devastating attacks of October 7th. So this year, the needs are great. We need as many people as possible, not just to walk, but to donate, to fundraise, to organize family teams or community group teams. So please keep an eye on your inbox because we're going to send details shortly on how you can register. People have been asking us about the location of the walk this year, as well as security considerations. Every year, security is it's not a priority. It is the ultimate priority of the walk. We work very closely with police and with our security team to develop a really detailed walk security plan, which takes into account a whole bunch of scenarios and considerations, because it's better to be over-prepared in a situation like this. We know that anti-Israel activists are going to be targeting the walk this year for protest. They do so every year. It's not a new phenomenon, and anyone who's been in previous years will have seen them. Obviously, this year, the situation is heightened, and the challenges we face regarding these protests has, without question, escalated. And so we've been very clear to police that while we have our part to do in terms of hiring private security and having robust plans and protocols in place, we really are counting on the police to do all that's required to ensure that those who enjoy the walk can do so safely, with confidence in their security, and frankly, can do so without obstruction. We have a right to peaceful freedom of assembly. This is a core part of our identity as a community, and we're not going to be intimidated, and we're not going to be provoked by anti-Israel activists. And so we are proceeding with a public in-person walk. It's going to take place in North York, and it will culminate in a post-walk event on our Sherman campus, 4600 Bathurst Street. So please prepare to join us that day, not just to walk, but also to bring your family and friends to the post-walk event. It's going to be a solidarity festival where there'll be an opportunity to enjoy Israeli music, Israeli culture, some great food. It's really going to be a meaningful day, but also a day where the focus is very much on the purpose of the walk, which is to show our support for the people of Israel, to raise dollars to help Israelis who are really hurting. And right now, especially, to send a message that we're not going to be intimidated. We are going to be public about who we are as Jews, about the values that we stand for, and about our love for Israel and our support for its people at this difficult time. So please, if you have any questions, reach out to us. But please save the date, June 9th. We're looking forward to seeing you and everyone else in the community out in the streets with us that day. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Noah, because we've had a lot happen over the last 2 weeks when we convened this call a couple of weeks ago in the area of political outreach and a number of developments that have taken place in the fight against anti-Semitism. So with that, Noah, I'm going to pass it over to you to share some updates, and then we can get into the Q&A.
Thanks, Steve. And you're right. The last time that we spoke on one of these calls, we just experienced the protests in Thornhill targeting synagogues there. And our message to the government was clear. There should be no protests at community spaces, but there needs to be a buffer to ensure that communal life is not threatened with harassment and intimidation and even violence. And those who violate this should face serious penalties. And just last week, our community had some great news coming out of Vaughan. After we called for laws restricting hateful protests in close proximity to Jewish institutions, Mayor Stephen Del Duca of Vaughan announced he will be introducing a bylaw to do just that, backstopped by penalties of up to $100,000 in fines. This is a serious measure that is a tangible and direct response to the challenge facing our community. And Mayor Del Duca has been a leading champion for our community throughout this deeply disturbing rise in anti-Semitism that we've been experiencing. He's often been the first, sometimes even the only leader to speak out strongly and take action. And we're very, very appreciative of his leadership on this front as well. This is a key priority for our community, to continue to keep our communities safe, to continue to keep our community infrastructure, whether it's community centers or synagogues or schools or childcare facilities, open and running. And it's essential that we have our elected officials taking meaningful steps to address the protests that are targeting these institutions and the safety and the costs associated with, unfortunately, the security threats that all of this poses to us. So right now, it's very important that our community thank Mayor Del Duca, to email him, but also to reach out to Vaughan City councillors, whether it's through email or phone calls or having meetings with them as if you live in Thornhill or you live elsewhere in Vaughan. Now's the time to be reinforcing the importance of this bylaw, reinforcing the positivity of them standing up for our community and ensuring that the city of Vaughan is being responsive to the needs of the Jewish community and looking after this very important issue. But it's not just a Vaughan problem. Jewish communities across Ontario are facing increasingly vicious harassment and intimidation. It's been going on for months, and it's getting worse, not better. And that's why CJA, our advocacy agent, has been lobbying the province to take action. This week, Toronto City Councillor Brad Bradford added his voice in a very loud and public way to this call to create safety zones around places of worship and community social infrastructure that should apply across the province. Councillor Bradford has been a leading voice at the municipal level against anti-Semitism here in Toronto, and it's very important that he receives support from our community while he's raising his voice so strongly to advance this important initiative. And so in addition to expressing appreciation in Vaughan, we also need to make sure that Councillor Bradford knows that he has our entire community behind him, standing shoulder to shoulder together in pushing for this initiative to keep our synagogues, our schools, our community centers safe from the hate that's targeting them all too often. At the federal level, we experienced this non-binding motion that was initially put forward by the NDP in Parliament last week that was very disturbing. In the end, it included a call for the restriction of military support for Israel, Canada's democratic ally, at a time when it's fighting a defensive war against Hamas, a banned terrorist entity in Canada, a war that Israel did not start, but that Israel must continue in order to keep its people safe from Hamas and other terrorist violence. The motion also affirmed support for UNRWA, which has been shown, an agency that's been shown to be complicit with Hamas in ongoing terrorism, including the October 7th attack. And while it's important that there's humanitarian aid to support innocent people in Gaza, this agency has shown itself to be complicit in terrorism. And that is something that needs to be taken into account when we're considering where Canadian taxpayer dollars are flowing. However, 2 changes were made to the motion before it passed. The recognition of Palestinian statehood, which was a key demand of anti-Israel activists pushing this resolution and would have been an enormous reward to Hamas, was removed. And there was an addition, a call for the immediate and unconditional release of the hostages and for Hamas to surrender. Despite the frustration with the motion, our community had impact. We mobilized by sending emails to MPs and making phone calls that demonstrated a strong and united response that played a part in getting those 2 elements of the motion changed. And while it wasn't enough, I think we can be proud that our community sent more than 900,000 emails to MPs through CJA's Action Alert, and nearly 10,000 phone calls were made to MP offices just here in the GTA from our community to push back against that awful motion that was proposed by the NDP. But the fight we're in is bigger than just one motion. We need to keep up our effort to push back. And that's why CJA will be launching a lawsuit challenging the government's funding of UNRWA. In addition to challenging this bad policy, we also have to reinforce those who are standing shoulder to shoulder with our community, as I've mentioned in those other contexts before. Right now, it's important for us to be thanking MPs who voted no, who voted against that motion. CJA has an action alert set up to do this. Already 10,000 people and 300,000 emails have been sent to thank MPs who stood by our community. And if you haven't already done this, I encourage you to do so. Right now, the MPs are in their ridings. And so finding an opportunity to meet with them if they voted against this resolution, to share your appreciation is something else that you can be doing. I met with my MP, Marco Mendicino, yesterday to thank him for his vote and his voice and his standing on principle for the community on this motion and throughout this very trying time for the community. When people do the right thing, it's imperative that we show them our appreciation because we need them to keep doing so. This is a marathon and not a sprint, and we need to ensure that we are continuing to take action and that our allies are continuing to benefit from our support and raising their voice against these kinds of negative initiatives. At the same time, those MPs who supported the motion also need to hear from our community so that they're confronted with our perspectives. Email, call, book meetings with MPs who voted yes to express your disappointment. Both of these steps have impact and are needed to backstop our communal lobbying efforts at this time in Ottawa. Steve, I'll pass things back to you. Hopefully that gives us enough fodder for Q&A, and we can get into a discussion.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Noah. So we've been getting some great questions coming through. One person asked about allies at Jewish community rallies and solidarity events. Obviously, looking at the Walk with Israel every year, it's important to us not just to ensure there's a strong Jewish presence, but that as many of our friends beyond the Jewish community are a part of the walk as possible, whether that's members of other ethnic and cultural communities, faith communities, but also, frankly, leaders in society, whether it's elected officials or people who are prominent beyond our community. I can assure you that when we're looking at the walk this year, ensuring we have allies there, vocal, present, and visible is going to be really important to us. And we're going to be inviting a significant number of groups and leaders to be joining us. But I also want to encourage people, when you think about the Walk with Israel this year, I want to encourage everyone on the call, A, to come to the walk, but B, to invite someone who wouldn't ordinarily come. It could be a member of the community who's not necessarily as involved with the community or with Israel. It could be a younger person in your life who wouldn't normally come, but is paying attention to these issues in a new way. But most importantly, it also could be someone who you're very close with, but you've never invited to the walk before. And if you know that there are people in your circle who are supportive, whether they're neighbors or colleagues, reach out to them, invite them. The worst they're going to do is say, I can't make it. But the best that could happen is they could come and join us and experience this very, very special day that we have as a community together. So yes, allies are a big priority. Someone asked as well about security for the walk and the operational considerations. So I just want to preface this by saying this is an open forum, this call right now. So we're always aware that anything we share in this open forum, and we want to be as transparent as possible, we're also aware that those who frankly oppose the Walk with Israel and oppose our community can take anything we share publicly and potentially use it against our community's interests. So when it comes to operational considerations, we're very selective in what we share publicly because there are real security issues at stake. But rest assured, we're well aware of the intentions of the anti-Israel movement to protest the walk and how they're going to do it. We're aware that there's going to be a higher volume of protesters this year than in any other year, we would imagine. And we've been very clear to police about the fact that our right to proceed with a walk unobstructed is sacrosanct. It's a core part of what it means to be a Canadian who enjoys constitutional freedoms. And so we are making it very clear that it's really important for police not only to have robust measures in place, and it's for police to determine exactly what's required. They are the law enforcement experts. Our role is to convey what our community's concerns are. But we're also asking police not just to ensure there's a strong operational presence, but to be very communicative with our community and with the broader public about what they're going to be doing to ensure the walk can proceed safely. So stay tuned. It's still a few months out. There's still some time to go. But rest assured, this is the ultimate priority we have when it comes to the walk. We are proceeding with a walk to show who we are and where we stand as a community, and we will not allow our rights to be restricted by those who spread hate. And so stay tuned for details. Someone else, Noah, had asked about federal election preparations and what's going to happen in the next election and what we're doing as a community to prepare for the next election. I want to dive into this right away, and then I'll turn it over to you. The first thing I want to share with people is that as a registered charity, there's no Canadian charity, none whatsoever, that's permitted to engage in political activity. And political activity is very clearly articulated on the Canada Revenue Agency's website. What that means really is that while an organization like UJA can speak out about the issues impacting our community, we can advocate for policies and we can educate the public about anti-Semitism and solutions to anti-Semitism. And frankly, we can also educate the public about the voting records of different members of parliament in different parties on different issues. But what we can't do is actively encourage someone to vote for or against a political party. So what that means is that when it comes to elections, we are very aware of our legal obligation to not put our charitable status at risk. At the same time, we are very open about encouraging every member of our community who's a voter to get involved in the political process in whatever party you feel most of an affinity for, whatever party or candidate speaks to you. Get involved, show up, volunteer. Become a member of their political party, volunteer on their constituency board. Every political party has at the local electoral district level a board of directors that kind of manages that local political party and helps organize the political campaign. If you really want to build a relationship with your local elected official, it's really important to do it not just when you're upset about an issue. It's important to do it well in advance of that. You need to be involved and be present, invite them to your community events, ask them to meet with you to talk about certain issues. But the more you're involved and around the candidate and the MP, frankly, the more you'll be able to explain what we're dealing with as a community and explain it in ways that they'll be able to hear. Having spent years working in politics, I can tell you, I've seen it time and again. People who are involved and who know how to constructively engage their elected official, what they have to say gets heard. And we need to be heard as a community. So please get involved. The best way to get involved is through CJPAC. It is not a registered charity, so it's permitted to be more actively involved in politics. Anyone in the community who's been involved politically will be aware of CJPAC. Just go online, look up CJPAC's website, connect with their team. They are the experts in getting involved in politics. So again, whatever political party you feel that you want to get involved with, just get involved and talk to CJPAC because they can get you connected in ways that you might not be able to get connected to on your own. But Noah, with the federal election coming up, is there anything that you think that you would add to that?
Well, I really want to reinforce the importance and value of CJPAC. Not only will they help you to connect, they'll make it easy. And if you've never been involved in politics before, but you want to start now, they will help you to learn what you need to know, to connect with the people you need to connect with, to give you the tools and skills that will be helpful and really make it easy for you to have impact. And each and every one of us can. At the local level, our representatives are just that. They're there to represent us. And the best way to make sure that they do is to have a personal relationship with them and to get involved in their election campaigns. Now, the federal election is a little ways away, but there will be a by-election in a Toronto riding in St. Paul's, where there's a sizable Jewish community, before the next federal election, most likely. And this is a great opportunity for people, whether you live in that riding, to get more engaged. I mean, by-elections are typically, they suffer from low voter engagement. People are not paying as much attention as they are in a general election. But that's a great opportunity for our community to double down and be even more engaged than they may otherwise be in a general election, both as voters, but also as volunteers. Even if you don't live in that riding, but you want to get involved, CJPAC can help with that. And they are running training sessions now for prospective volunteers and people who want to understand better how they can make an impact in elections, with a specific focus on that by-election that's going to be coming up in St. Paul's. So I encourage you, if you're interested in getting involved, whether it's for the federal election down the road or whether it's more immediately in the by-election that's coming up in one of our ridings that we have a strong community presence in, please do reach out to CJPAC. They are the agency that is there to help you. And we need as many people getting involved now, regardless of what party you want to affiliate with, regardless of what candidate you prefer. Engagement, involvement, mobilization, and participation from our community is essential. We are a tiny, tiny community. We are about 1% of the population in Canada now. We're about 4% of the population of Toronto. We need to leverage and mobilize the entirety of our community to have disproportionate impact. And that means whether it's if we're talking about politics and elections, that means reaching out to CJPAC and letting them help you make a difference for the community in that way.
Okay. We've got a number of questions that have come in. I'm gonna jump right into them. The first one that I want to touch on, someone asked about whether we can explain sort of the difference between what UJA does and what CJA does. So CJA is the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. It's the advocacy agent of not just UJA in Toronto, but of all the Jewish federations across Canada. And CJA is really our voice to leaders in Canadian society, primarily leaders in government, but also leaders in, it could be in unions, in other faith and ethnic communities, leaders in, at the university administration level, leaders in media. They're really our team of lobbyists and communicators who speak on behalf of the community to those in positions of influence and authority. What UJA does is very different. UJA really exists to mobilize the full strength of the Toronto Jewish community, in the case of Toronto, of the community to be as united as possible and to take all of our resources and dedicate them in common cause to the biggest challenges we face as a community. So, if you think about the history of Jewish communities over many centuries, and you can go back to Maimonides, he's a great example. Maimonides once wrote that he had not yet found a Jewish community when he was traveling in Europe that didn't have a single kuppah, a single one-stop shop where there was a gathering of all tzedakah to address the holistic needs of the community. And that's really what we exist to do. We are the central kuppah to make sure that the Jewish community that's struggling with poverty is taken care of, that the Jewish community that's struggling to afford day school education can have that opportunity for their kids. But not just day school education, all of the various experiences that we know create for a strong Jewish identity, whether it's JCCs, summer camps, PJ Library, all of those initiatives. But UJA also exists to ensure that the full strength of our community, our professional staff, our agencies, our donors, our volunteers, all of that can be channeled in common cause to address some of the biggest threats we're facing. We did this in the case of the immediate aftermath of October 7th by rallying the community together to show our public support for Israel, but also to raise dollars for Israelis in need. And it's a very telling fact that Toronto was of all the Jewish communities on the planet, Toronto was only second to New York in the dollars we raised to help Israel with the emergency. Every dollar we raise through the Israel Emergency Appeal goes to causes in Israel. We don't take any of it. All of it goes to causes in Israel, and we raise more than any other diaspora community than New York City. So we responded in a collective, unified way to the immediate urgency, the urgent needs in Israel. And now we're taking that same energy and applying it to the fight against anti-Semitism, because similarly, there's no one need or one area of intervention where we need to be strong as a community. We need to be strong in advocacy through CJA, but we also need to be strong on campus through Hillel. We need to be strong through community security initiatives and physical protections for our community. We need to be strong in our proactive education, especially around contemporary anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. We need to be strong in a whole bunch of ways that go beyond CJA's work, which is really about engaging at the leadership level. So CJA is our voice outside the Jewish community to leaders. UJ exists to bring the whole Jewish community together, to channel our strength into one common strategy that we're all a part of. So that's really kind of the distinction between the two. Noah, I don't know if you've got anything to add there, but that's a common question that does come up.
There's another question that came in that I think is related to how the Jewish community organizations are working together so that we're not sort of duplicating and overlapping in a way that's inefficient and ineffective, frankly. And I want to say that since October 7th, I don't think we've ever experienced closer collaboration and cooperation among Jewish community organizations before. It's unfortunate that was the catalyst that brought us all together. But in the immediate aftermath, we began having calls with daily calls, I should say, with a dozen different Jewish community organizations, whether we're talking about B'nai B'rith, Honest Report in Canada, Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center, Hillel Ontario, Stand With Us, and a number of others, to make sure, at a minimum, that we were all discussing the issues that we were facing together, that we were benefiting from each other's insights and expertise and experience. And whatever decisions or approaches we might take, which could be different because each of these organizations is different, not just in mandate, but in terms of orientation, and they may have different imperatives coming from different parts of the community. We were finding alignment, building trust, and really have developed a rhythm, frankly, over the last number of months, and a level of collaboration and cooperation that has really been amazing to see develop. And we've never been as united as a community. Looking at this array of organizations and the way that we've all come together. I mentioned before that I was at a meeting with my MP yesterday. I was actually at that meeting with representatives from probably 15 or 16 different Jewish community organizations and synagogues that all came together with really a unified approach to the issues that are happening today. And I think that has been an important thing that's developed. And I think the relationships that we've forged through this will put us in good stead beyond just the issues of anti-Semitism and the immediate crisis that we're facing, but will be durable and sustained over time. So in addition to how UJA interacts with its sort of funded partners, there's also a lot of work that's been going on to ensure that we have a whole of community response to the current challenges across all organizations, and that we're deepening that relationship and that unity to maximize our impact. I mean, now is the time where we all need to come together and put everything aside and focus on what matters most, and that's achieving results for the community.
Okay. No, we had a question someone asked about the issue of police enforcement of hate propaganda, hate speech laws in Canada. So someone had asked the question because they had heard that, and I'm not sure where this came from, but they had heard that, police were saying that because in the case of hate speech laws, you need the provincial attorney general to sign off on the prosecution before it can proceed. They had heard from police, so they're saying that the attorney general's office was not keen to actually pursue those charges. That's the first I've heard, to be honest. I have not heard that. I can tell you that people are asking if we're advocating for the attorney general to do so. CJA has for many years been advocating for uniform guidelines across the entire country for attorney generals to use to understand what anti-Semitism is. And we anchor that in the IRA definition, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, which includes anti-Zionism. It includes the demonization of Israelis and the denial of Israel's right to exist. All of the things that we know to be anti-Semitic that a lot of people don't necessarily see to be anti-Semitic because it's presented in code. So, I'm just going to jump into this one by saying I've not heard that about the Attorney General's office. I would be surprised. Certainly, we believe.
Oh, Steve, you jumped onto mute there.
Certainly, we believe that that the law exists for a reason, to be enforced when it's broken. And when we see people, advocating genocide against Jews or against anyone for that matter, when we see people willfully promoting hatred against Jews, the law creates a high barrier to actually charge someone because freedom of speech is freedom of expression is a very important Canadian constitutional right. But at the same time, the law does make it clear that someone who engages in this activity can be charged criminally. So Noah, can you speak to sort of, not necessarily where the line is, but this issue of hate speech laws and what can be done to ensure that they're actually enforced more consistently?
Well, I think there's a very human tendency to, when faced with a challenging situation, to find to defer to somebody else being responsible for the solution for that. And it's not just confined to sort of interpersonal relations. I think it's It's something that we see in politics and in our public institutions as well. And that's really been the cornerstone of the efforts that have been undertaken to, and I'll pick on the community safety zone initiatives. This isn't something that is just the responsibility of police, just the responsibility of municipalities, or just the responsibility of the province. All three have a role to play. And it's really important that we are holding our city councilors and our mayors and our MPPs and our local police accountable for how they respond to these situations as they emerge and how they respond to them together. And I think, ultimately that's where we want to drive things. Having community safety zones put in place is important. Mayor Del Duca has taken a significant step forward in bringing forward this motion. And if the motion passes, as we hope and expect that it will then be for local authorities to enforce it, because a law is only worth the paper it's written on if it's being enforced by the agencies, whether it's bylaw officers or local police or whomever that are tasked with enforcement. And it's this interaction between our elected officials and our police that's really important to reinforce all the way through here and the different levels of government. And it's for our community to ensure that these important initiatives don't get lost in the cracks between, but that we are making sure that our politicians and our police are working together to ensure that our community is kept safe. Steve, there was another question that I saw related to the effectiveness and impact of these kinds of email campaigns and phone call campaigns that CEJA has been running and the impact that it has on our elected officials. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here because we've known each other for a long time, but you used to work for a member of parliament many, many years ago. And I'm wondering if you could share, personal experience, the way in which an email from somebody, a phone call from somebody, outreach from somebody who's actively involved in a local riding and has a relationship either with staff or with the MP has an impact, and sort of the difference between them and what people should be considering as they're thinking about how they can make a difference.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think we try to make things complicated, right? Because we're human. It's really simple. If you want to be heard, you need to have a relationship. And one of the things that we've set out in a previous call is that our strategy to fight anti-Semitism is really based on three ideas. The first is that anti-Israel activists are becoming much bolder and more aggressive. We need greater accountability for them. Legal accountability, civil law accountability, social accountability, so that broader society pushes back and says, this cannot happen in our country. So for those who are spreading hate against us, we need heightened accountability, and that's what's driving our strategy. But we can't just focus on our opponents. We have to focus on those in the movable middle. People, the vast majority of Canadians, and we know this from the research, who don't follow these issues closely, who really have never been to the Middle East, have never really thought about these issues. And more than a few of those people are in important positions in society. They're in elected politics. They are in newsrooms. They are in places where decisions are made that shape how Canadians talk about these issues. And so, we often assume that my politician's already made up their mind, or my local elected official knows all about these issues. In many cases, they might not be well versed on the issue, and having a personal connection to the issue always makes it much more relevant. And so, just as we focus on accountability for anti-Semites, we need to be focused on building and deepening relationships with Canadians in the middle. Because these are Canadians who would never go to a rally, pro or anti-Israel. They would never necessarily read the Times of Israel or Al Jazeera. They are not in the bubble that we're currently in. And so if we want to reach these people, and this is true for politicians, but it's also true for your neighbors who might not be Jewish, we need to speak to them at a level they can understand. We need to build a relationship and enable them to understand who we are as their neighbors or as their voters, the values we hold. And from that relationship, we'll now have a basis to be able to actually talk to them about the difficult issues that we're dealing with as a community. I always give the example, and I gave it to you earlier today, Noah, of I'll never forget, working for an MP years ago. And when you work for an MP, you receive a lot of emails, you receive a lot of phone messages, correspondence, all of that. But I'll never forget, we received a phone call from someone who was very active in the constituency. This is someone who knew the MP for many years, had volunteered on his campaign, frankly, ran his campaign in a town in our constituency, was very active, very thoughtful guy, someone who cared a lot about the issues. And he called and left a voice message that he really wanted to talk to the MP about an important issue that was before Parliament. And the MP prioritized calling that person because he understood who this person was. He respected him. He understood that this is someone who's very civically engaged, cares about his community. This wasn't just a random stranger emailing the MP. This is someone who showed up repeatedly, not just when they wanted something from the MP, but they showed up because they really cared about their community and they consistently were engaged. That set them apart. That enabled them to be heard in a way that might not be the case when it's just an email. So if all you can do is send an email, send the email. They count the emails. The emails make a difference. We generated, as Noah said, almost 1 million emails before the NDP motion came before Parliament. I don't think the motion would have been changed were it not for all those emails. I think, the risk that motion would have recognized the state of Palestine, which would have been a dangerous new precedent. The fact that the motion did not previously call on Hamas to lay down its arms and release all the hostages, it was a bad motion, but it would have been much worse if we had not spoken out as a community. So if all you can do is send an email, send the email. But if you can do more, please do more. Make a phone call, set up a meeting, invite them to, if you're involved with a synagogue or with another community group, invite them to your next event. Build a relationship. And if you care about politics, if you really like your local MP or you really like a candidate from a different party, just get involved. Get involved, show up, campaign. And that's what's going to enable you to build the kind of relationship that will ensure that your phone calls get returned, that they really think carefully about what you're saying, because you've shown up already. The other thing I want to share, going back to the conversation about the Walk with Israel, we have a really fantastic program that we've launched through UJA Genesis and UJA's Israel engagement teams, called Israel in Focus. This is a fantastic program. We've built it around the Walk with Israel. It's for high school students. If you have a child or a grandchild in high school, this is a great online learning program where they deepen their knowledge about Israel, and it culminates in the high schooler dedicating a certain number of hours to volunteering at the Walk with Israel. And if they do this program, it actually qualifies them for high school credits for community service hours. So if you know a high schooler who's always looking for their community volunteer hours, please go on our site or just follow our newsletters. You'll find the Israel in Focus High School program. They'll deepen their knowledge of Israel and they'll get to be a part of the Walk with Israel and help us ensure that it's an amazing, amazing experience. Noah, I'm going to take a glance at the other questions. We've got a few more minutes left.
I wanted to touch. There's one that just came through that sparked something that I want to touch on. It's about how to influence Canadians, like the people in the middle who are persuadable. And I think one of the things that has stood out from a number of rounds of public opinion research that we've done over the last number of years is that the single greatest factor influencing whether somebody will recognize anti-Semitism, take an interest in anti-Semitism, and stand up against anti-Semitism is their relationship with a Jewish person. And, Steve mentioned that a lot of people are just following this stuff peripherally. The thing that's going to make them pay attention and care and want to do something about it is if their Jewish friend, neighbor, or colleague welcomes them in, brings them in, embraces them, and shares with them what this moment is like for our community, what this moment is like for this city, what it means for this country and our shared values. And I think that cannot be understated. The role that we can all play in our own individual relationships with people outside of our community to help bring them closer to our community, to understand what's happening right now and why it matters beyond our community and for everyone else. And so I'd really encourage everyone, Steve's mentioned a number of examples here, how we can have impact, whether it's inviting our non-Jewish friends, colleagues, and neighbors to come to the walk. But it goes beyond that. It's about Shabbat dinners. It's about inviting people to come to your Seder if you're comfortable. There are lots of ways that we can bring people into our community where they feel welcome and they feel a sense of connection and they come to understand who we are and what the attacks on us are all about. And that can translate into really meaningful action and vocal support. So I just wanted to reinforce that, Steve, in response to that question about that persuadable, movable middle that's out there in this country, and that the biggest catalyst for reaching them and spurring them to act is actually relationships. And whether it's with a politician or it's with a neighbor or it's with a colleague, this is how our community can have the quickest, deepest, and most meaningful impact straight away.
And building on that, Noah, I'll never forget years ago, and we've looked at a lot of polling results on this topic. We've conducted a lot of studies on this. I've sat behind a lot of focus group room glasses where you sit and you watch people talk about these issues, people from outside of our community. And I'll never forget a few years ago when we did a group in Toronto. We had a group of women gathered around together, people who didn't know each other, people who were not Jewish, not connected to this issue. And the moderator started asking people about stereotypes of Jews. Have they heard things, or do they think things about Jews that are positive? And people started naming some positive stereotypes. And then the moderator shifted to the question of, have you heard negative stereotypes about Jews? Things that either you believe or you've heard. And one woman in the room started speaking up, and I'm behind the glass, and I immediately thought, oh, you're the anti-Semite in the room. She was saying some terrible things that I'm not going to repeat about Jews. And she culminated in saying that she thought that, Jews are racist. She thought that Jews think they're better than other people and all of this stuff. And the moderator turned to the rest of the room and asked people, have you heard that? Like, do you agree with that? What's your sense of that? And a few people started saying, yeah, I could see that. People were saying this. And all of a sudden, one woman in the group spoke up. She was probably in her late 20s. This is someone who doesn't follow world events closely. You could tell in the focus group earlier, she doesn't follow the Middle East closely. She doesn't know much about these issues, but she spoke up and her voice was a bit shaken. And she said, I strongly disagree with what's being said. She was really upset by it. And she said, I strongly disagree. And she went on to say that she grew up with Jewish people. She has a lot of Jewish friends. She said, I've always found them to be very inclusive. They invited me to their holidays and their bar mitzvahs and celebrations. And I don't agree at all that they think they're better than other people. I think this is wrong. For someone to speak up in a room of strangers and to say that, it really gave me an aha moment. This is someone who didn't know anything about the history of the Middle East, knew nothing about the history of anti-Semitism, but she had a lived experience with Jews that not only inoculated her against anti-Semitism, it enabled her to recognize it when it appeared. And it frankly gave her the confidence to be not a bystander, but someone who stood up and said, this is not acceptable. We need not just one of those people, we need millions of those people across this country saying, I know the Jewish community, I know I have Jewish friends, I have Jewish colleagues. What you're saying is wrong and needs to stop. Because as you said, Noah, we're 1% of the population. If we're the only ones saying it, we're not going to succeed. And so we really need more of these upstanders. And frankly, the way to build upstanders is not in the moment of a crisis. It's years and years and years in advance of that crisis happening. It's through Passover dinners. It's through Shabbat dinners. It's through inviting people to your celebrations and to your bar and bat mitzvahs. All of those things are what actually creates an ally more than anything else. Now, once you have an ally, you want to engage them and bring them into the tent to actually take action. And that's a great segue to say, There's a wonderful event coming up April 7th. A number of people have commented in the chat about solidarity events and what we can do to show publicly where we stand. April 7th, everyone will know, is the 6-month anniversary of the attacks and 6 months of more than 100 hostages continuing to be held in Gaza by the terrorists. So this event is slated to take place April 7th. We're going to keep people informed about the exact locations because I think the location and the time has not yet been formally announced. If you would like to be involved in this event or any other upcoming events, please sign up for our activist updates. I'm going to ask the team to just drop that in the chat one more time. Sign up for activist updates. That's where we not only share what UJ is doing and kind of message points and information about how to advocate. We also use it as a platform to share upcoming events that are being organized by other community groups. And the April 7th event is being organized by a grassroots group. It looks like a fantastic concept for an event. So sign up for our newsletters. We will keep in touch and we will share with you details on how you can attend and be a part of this event. And just a shout out to the organizers of the Canadian Women Against Anti-Semitism event that took place this past weekend. There was a fantastic crowd. I think it was a couple of thousand people showed up at Queen's Park. Really wonderful speakers, and really a powerful example of the community taking ownership of our voice and saying, this is a moment where women in particular need to be heard and believed and listened to, and the victims of October 7th who can't speak for themselves right now, we need to be their voice. And we need to remind Canadians what's happening, why Israel's there in Gaza, and what needs to happen in order for this nightmare to end. So kol hakavod to everyone who organized that event. But again, there are many great grassroots groups putting on events these days. So the best way to stay informed as to what all that's happening is to sign up for the activist updates, and we'll help spread the word. And if your organization or your group of grassroots activists has something in the works, please email us, reach out to us. We can be a source of support, whether it's just some guidance on communications or security, whether it's helping to spread the word through our activist newsletter or through our website. Please reach out to us at activist@ujafed.org. I'll ask the team to drop that into the chat as well. Activist@ujafed.org. Email us, and we're very happy to be in touch to see how we can be helpful. Noah, I'm going to take another look at the questions to see what's happening. People are asking about social media and what we can do through social media. Interestingly enough, one of the things that we've noticed in the research we've conducted is that, if you're 35 plus, you're consuming most of your information on these topics through mainstream media, through television news, through online news, and to a certain extent social media, but frankly, you're usually going to the mainstream media outlets to get your information about what's happening. If you're under 35, it's completely the opposite. You're living in a very different world. And if you're in that 18 to 24, 25-year-old category, you're in a very different world entirely. It's a world of TikTok. It's a world of short, punchy, authentic, not professionally developed, but really authentic ground level content. That's what's really shaping your view on this issue, which is both an opportunity and a danger for us as a community. It means, anyone can put out any kind of content. It can be as malicious and false as they want it to be. And they'll get eyes on it, and they'll get an audience on TikTok and other platforms. So Noah, to this point, someone was asking what we can do on social media, not just help spread the word, but to build allies and enable people to come out and say, I stand with the Jewish people, I stand with the people of Israel.
So there are three things I'd like to share on this. Number one is that the way that the algorithm is constructed on TikTok makes it very difficult to have any impact there. It deliberately, I think, removes content that we would love more people to be seeing and learning about, given what's going on. And I think it's not coincidental that you have a move in the United States right now to ban TikTok as a platform in the United States. There are two channels that I'd encourage people to take a look at that UJA has been instrumental in developing since October 7th. The first is called No Room for Terror. go check out No Room for Terror on Instagram, and maybe somebody on the team can pop that link into the chat as well. This account has been highlighting three things: the depravity of Hamas, the plight of the hostages, and the hate targeting our community here in Toronto. And there is excellent content. Some of it's garnering, more than 1 million views on Instagram, and really penetrating and getting a lot of traction. And it's great stuff that people can be sharing to get the word out on those three things. The other account that I want to highlight is called Jewish and Canadian, and it's a softer approach. It's for people who would be more likely to disengage from the hard-nosed No Room for Terror message, but tells the story of our Jewish community here, normalizes us, makes us approachable, helps people to connect with us on more approachable topics, while also sharing the reality of our experience in relatable ways, told mostly from first-person experiences. So I think check out those two accounts. Those offer some additional content that people can share that goes beyond sort of the corporate messaging that comes out, or the advocacy messaging that's coming from our partners like CEDRA, for some of the other organizations, whether B'nai B'rith or Friends of Simon Wiesenthal. And I encourage you to look at the whole spectrum of content that's being generated by the community in the various niches that we have, to find what you think will resonate most with your friends. And I think, the principle that Steve and I were speaking about before, about that personal connection, holds true in the virtual world in the same way that it does in the real world. How many of us scroll past content that is being pushed out by advertisements or otherwise? But when we see a friend of ours share something, that's going to capture our attention in a different way, particularly if it's speaking about a personal experience that they're having and something that's directly related to them. So sharing content in your broader social circles on social media, sharing content with non-Jewish friends, colleagues, neighbors, that helps them to understand your experience right now, is going to have impact. Because at the end of the day, as challenging as those algorithms may be, that person-to-person connection is still potent and powerful.
Thank you for that, Noah. So we only have about a minute left, so I'm just going to cover off a couple of items very quickly. Someone had asked, even though it was covered earlier, people joined a bit later. Someone had asked about the bylaw in Vaughan. So just to recap, Mayor Del Duca has advocated for a bylaw to be brought forward at council. This would be a bylaw that would ban protests within 100 meters of community institutions, such as places of worship. It would actually have a lot of teeth. It would mean that if someone violates this bylaw, they could be subject to a penalty of up to $100,000. So this has not yet been passed. It's been proposed by the mayor. And we are really encouraging anyone who lives in Vaughan to email their councillor, and frankly, not just their councillor. Feel free to email all members of council and say that you believe that this should be passed as soon as possible. And if you live in Toronto, similarly, Brad Bradford, a councillor from the eastern part of the city, has advocated for similar community safety zones to be established to prevent protests around institutions. Likewise, email your councillor, email the mayor, tell them that you believe this needs to happen in Toronto right away, because this will give police a specific, and bylaw enforcement, a specific tool to prevent anti-Israel activists from doing what they've been doing in our city, but also in places like Montreal. The more that you give someone who's an aggressive protester the ability to crowd and encroach on our institutions, the higher the risk of danger to public safety or us being obstructed from actually accessing our places of worship, for example. So we need to put an end to this, and we need to have a clear across-the-board policy that says that protesters cannot target our institutions in this way, or frankly, any house of worship within 100 meters. And then lastly, I'll just throw out one other comment. Someone had asked about Passover Seders and what can be done to augment the Haggadah, what can be done to tell the story of what's happened since October 7th in the context of Passover. One of the reasons why, we've suggested that you invite someone who's not necessarily Jewish or wouldn't necessarily attend a Seder to your Seder is because it is an opportunity not just to talk about our history as Jews and our story, but also to talk about what the past 6 months have meant for us. So our team is working on kind of different creative ways to do this. One of the things that we're looking at and really encouraging anyone to do, and stay tuned because I imagine we're going to have some materials out shortly about it, is to have an empty chair at your Seder for a hostage. And again, stay tuned to our newsletters because we'll share materials as they come out. But frankly, anyone can do this from their own home. The stories of the hostages are all online. I think it's very powerful and meaningful to say we've got one table that we've designated for a hostage who's still held in Gaza, and take a moment to read the story of a hostage who's being held. You'll see in our Desk of Adaminsky newsletter every week, we're highlighting the story of another person who's either murdered on October 7th or is still being held hostage in Gaza. These stories are out there. They're in many Israeli media outlets, in English as well as in Hebrew. Really want to encourage you, save an empty seat at your Seder table and tell everyone at the table, this is in honor of a hostage who's being held. And now we're going to read the account of one of the hostages being held. Obviously, you want to be age appropriate. You want to be respectful of everyone who's at the table, but we shouldn't act as though this is an ordinary Passover. We should be responsive to what's happened, and we should make it clear that we can't fully enjoy any holiday until all of the hostages come home. So with that, Noah, I think we'll wrap up for the call. I want to thank everyone for joining us and for staying on for the hour with us. Please reach out if there's something we didn't answer, and I'm sorry we couldn't get to every question. Email us, info@jewishtoronto.com. If you have an idea for advocacy or for activism, email us at activist@ujafed.org. Until then, we'll see you at the next briefing in 2 weeks' time, and reach out to us if anything comes up that we can assist with. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye now.